I find this to be interesting in regards to the Doc Rivers deal because, Dan has to be our news and information guy, has to, he kind of got to get it right? Like, we can, and when his role switches on the weekends and he's hosting his own show, he can do a little bit what I'm doing, where you just heard from his update. It's not done yet, but Doc Rivers is expected to become the new head coach of the Bucks, whereas I could say, hey, man, this is going to happen. It just hasn't officially happened yet. And what's interesting is I got a call. I'm actually broadcasting from Coleman Coliseum. That's where the University of Alabama plays their home basketball games. We'll be broadcasting the Alabama-Auburn basketball game tonight on Compass Media Networks. Anyway, I was driving from Birmingham, which is about an hour from Tuscaloosa. Driving from Birmingham to Tuscaloosa, and I got a phone call from a friend of mine who's in the media. He's like, can you believe that Doc Rivers left ESPN and didn't let him break the story? Somebody from CNN Sports broke the story. But we don't know who broke it. And my pushback would be, and I know this from firsthand examples. There have been stories, and I shared with you guys yesterday, like, I knew Tom Telesco was getting the Raiders job probably 16 hours before it was announced, but I was asked by a couple people really close to it, hey, please don't say anything until we tell you you can say something. And so what happens is the parties that are actually involved, they don't want to say anything because they don't want to jinx it. Like Doc Rivers, he probably told ESPN, hey, I'm going to take this deal, but we got to make sure the ink dries and everything's right. So please don't run it. Don't go with it. I will tell you when you can go with it. And then somebody else, you could be in the office printing out the contract details for him to sign. And you could say, hey, I just saw the contract, and then it was given to me, and it was signed, and that's where, it comes from anywhere. But I'm kind of blown away by people that are surprised that it happened this quickly. Do you think you're going to fire your head coach 43 games into the season and not have, unless there's some tragedy or tragic event or some need to suspend or something off the court, whatever that surprises you, where you have to make a quick move. If you're going to fire him just performance-based, hey, we don't think this is working, which is what appears to have happened in Milwaukee, you better have a guy waiting. And you can say, you're allowed to be critical of Doc Rivers and his team's coming up short at times in the playoffs all you want. What you don't get is, hey, show me somebody out there who has that resume. Right? And he's not the only one with a crazy NBA resume. Not the only one. But if you don't like Doc Rivers, who else are you going to go hire that's won an NBA championship? Who else are you going to hire that's dealt with tricky superstars? And I don't think Giannis is seen as a tricky superstar, but obviously, by all accounts, he wanted the previous head coach, and then he's like, nah, it ain't working. No one is head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks or gets fired as head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks unless Giannis Antetokounmpo signs off on it. That's just the way it works. It doesn't mean this was completely his decision, but if he wanted a different head coach, whoever it was, or the previous head coach, they would still be in charge. But I love the Doc Rivers. And I've heard it from my brethren here at Fox Sports Radio. Because most of our shows are based in Southern California, their view of Doc Rivers is Lob City and the dynasty that never was. It doesn't matter to them that Chris Paul got hurt. It doesn't matter to them that Blake Griffin got hurt. It doesn't matter to them that COVID really kind of did them in. It doesn't matter. What matters to them is, hey, you never won a championship. You haven't won anything. And the Lakers have. The Lakers came off their 5 worst years as a franchise and then won a title. And you have not. And Doc's had 3-1 lead. Doesn't matter how you got him or if you should have been up 3-1. You gave away 3-1 leads. But my issue is, if you don't like the Doc Rivers hire and you're in we got to win now mode, tell me who you are going to hire. We do this all the time. We do it with teams that are going to go into the college football playoff or teams that are going to go in the NCAA tournament. You want to put a team in the field, you have to take somebody out. And if you're going to not hire Doc Rivers, tell me who you would have hired who could save this season because they have the experience of, one, taking over a team midseason, two, of coaching in the playoffs and winning in the playoffs. For whatever reason, Doc Rivers becomes this like hot button sort of guy that elicits some sort of anger from people, which I don't really understand. If not him, who? I love Jeff Van Gundy. I think Jeff Van Gundy would be great. Okay, but Jeff Van Gundy was kind of a curmudgeon last year calling NBA games. He's never won an NBA championship. He's just not as beloved. But he did work well with superstars. There's a guy, but the difference is one guy's won championships, one guy has not. Yes, Dan Byer.
It also comes a little to the fact that what we talked about yesterday is a lot of these opinions that we see put out there are because people haven't really paid attention, and there's an easy target with Doc Rivers. What's interesting is it is very much a full circle sort of thing, considering where he played collegiately, which is in Milwaukee at Marquette. Not saying that's the reason, but you want to talk about storybook and how things could happen. Like maybe there's even some symmetry there. But to your point, I just felt that he's an easy target to attack or to have an opinion about this, because I heard 3 or 4 times, whoa, something must have happened behind the scenes for Adrian Griffin to be fired. Like that's where people's minds went because they had not been paying attention at all. So then now all of a sudden, maybe the other people are saying, well, I haven't been paying attention, so Doc Rivers' name is now into it. So now let's just attack Doc Rivers, who, by the way, sometimes does get a free pass for some of the things that he didn't do. Now, I'm not saying he's the greatest coach in the world. However, he's not going to wreck this ship. I mean, it's going to be what it's going to be. And I feel he's just an easy target. They may not win it all. They may lose in the Eastern Finals. They may lose, the run to the Pacers. Who knows what could happen? But it just seems to me easy target to point to because there was nothing else that anybody had any thoughts or opinions on because they weren't paying attention.
You know what it signifies to me, Dan, is most people will admit, hey, I don't watch a lot of NBA regular season, right? And Charles Barkley's admitted as such. Like, I don't watch all the games. But then when something happens, they act like they've watched all of them. I watch every game. Like, no, you don't. No, you don't. You don't. Especially if you're not a hardcore Bucks fan. Like, even when the Bucks were winning an NBA championship, they still were getting, odd times in terms of when they're playing because they're not a big watch.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the bothersome part. Like, I'm with you, where they make assumptions without actually having watched or paid attention to the Bucks at all. But again, I like the Doc Rivers hire just because there isn't another guy out there that has that resume, and you're trying to win now. It makes complete sense to me. Again, does that make him a great coach? Or no, but like, what are their other options? I hate the imaginary option thing that we do in the sports media, which is, and we do all the time, like, would you trade so-and-so? Okay, well, what are you offering in trade? What am I getting?
Yeah. I'd trade him. I'd get rid of him.
Like, you just get rid of him? Like, we get this thing all the time. Who was it last year who's supposed to, retire? I just want him to retire. Who was that, Jay Stu, who Stephen A. said, man, this guy should just retire. Can't watch him anymore. And you're just like just insane statements from people. Would you trade him? No. Would you trade him? Yes. What am I trading for? If a perfect example is your mom gave you Oreo cookies and you got them every day for lunch. Somebody said, would you trade the Oreo cookies? Well, no, I love Oreo cookies. Okay, yeah, but would you trade them for, a chalupa 5 days a week? Well, yes, I would. 1 day of Oreos for 5 days of chalupa. Sure. Taco snack as well. Sorry, these are the names of my childhood lunchtime things you could buy. at Levita Elementary. It's Doug Gottlieb Show here on Fox Sports Radio. Yeah, I'm with you on the fans that haven't watched making opinions about things that don't matter, and we can now go back to not really paying attention to the Bucks until the playoffs. And and Doc Rivers gets up 3-1. We're going to pay attention to that again. But my challenge to people is, if you don't like the hire, that's fine. Tell me somebody out there who has a better resume, who's easier to slide in, who gives you any sort of chance to win it this year. I don't think somebody exists. All right, it's Doug Gottlieb Show, Fox Sports Radio, and we got a lot to get to with our next guest. Mark Stein, NBA correspondent on Substack, co-hosts the podcast This League Uncut with fellow insider Chris Haynes. You can find it wherever you download your podcasts. And Stein, let's start with yesterday in Milwaukee. What was your reaction to the coaching change?
I was surprised that they were willing to do it during the season to a degree. A couple weeks ago, one of my most trusted NBA informants actually said to me, Terry Stotts would be coaching this team right now if he was still there. And I didn't believe it. And this person is just rock solid, but I wasn't doubting the person. I just struggled to imagine, is Milwaukee really going to make a coaching change halfway through year one with a coaching hire endorsed by Giannis Antetokounmpo? Is that really what are things that bad? And I clearly, I was proven right, but by all of 2 games, game 43, they made the coaching change.
Okay, so here's what I've been told, but I don't even profess, Mark, to have anywhere near the detailed sourcing that you have, right? So as you point out, so they had, so Bud had kind of run its course, and Giannis was really frustrated that he didn't get to guard Jimmy Butler in the playoffs last year, right? And anyway, they run Bud out of town, and he swore by Adrian Griffin because he didn't like the Nick Nurse vibe. He didn't like some of those other guys, so I don't know the nature of that relationship. But the Terry Stotts thing, the blow up between he and Terry Stotts, did not go over well. And Terry is not only revered in Milwaukee because he coached there, but revered by Damian Lillard and others in the NBA. And that, along with the lack of connectivity defensively, is what led to this. Is that accurate?
Well, I would say it like this. I think it's been rocky in Milwaukee since mid-October, before Halloween, and the Stotts situation. No, excuse me.
So what happened? What made 2 grown men, what actually happened?
No, look, Terry decided to leave, and I can't sit here and speak for him on why he decided to walk away at that point. But I just think that was emblematic of the fact that there has been tension in that locker room, in that building from the jump. And there were so many subsequent stories about, we saw there was the game when Giannis was frustrated about being taken out and basically sent himself back in. We had the reports about, Bucks players going to Adrian Griffin and asking him to restore more of last season's defensive coverages because they didn't like the scheme that he was trying to implement. We had my podcast partner, Chris Haynes, reporting about Bobby Portis voicing displeasure with the way things were going after an in-season tournament loss. It was just one thing after another. I think from the jump, Adrian Griffin struggled to get buy-in from that group as a first-time coach. And I reported this at length yesterday that, yes, we've known since May that Giannis was throwing his support behind Adrian Griffin, that was the candidate he wanted to replace Mike Budenholzer. But as it's been described to me more recently, that was more that Giannis wanted the Bucks to go with someone rather than Nick Nurse. He did not want the Bucks to hire Nurse, and so he decided to champion Griffin. And it was curious at the time because they really had no previous working relationship. It's not like, Adrian Griffin has been an assistant coach with many different teams. It's not like he had ever really spent time working with Giannis. So it was curious to me from the jump. And, again, since mid-October, it's been one thing after another.
Okay. So, Doc Rivers, was there any other choice, any other possibility other than Doc Rivers out there?
Not to me. I mean, look, Doc Rivers has no shortage of critics. Doc Rivers' playoff record, he's been in this game for a long time. He knows how it works. It's been more than 15 years since he's won a championship, and there have been a lot of playoff disappointments in those 15 years. And, that stuff is going to get thrown at him. But I still think he is a tremendous coach. And when you haven't had player buy-in really since mid-October, and, we're halfway through the season now, he's going to establish that very quickly. He's going to get that very quickly. So to me, it was, he's the obvious choice based on who's available, who's out there. And, based on everything I had heard, I think he was pretty happy in the TV game.
Right. And
taking a year away from this. I think the Bucks had to lobby him pretty hard to get him to want to do this. But, I mean, look, with Giannis and Dame, you've got a shot at a championship, even with all the defensive issues this team has. So, to me, he's the right choice. Not even a question.
Okay, Mark Stein joining us here. This League Uncut, he and Chris Haynes, great podcast. Download it. He works for Substack as well. He joins now the Doug Gottlieb Show on Fox Sports Radio. A lot of talk about trade deadline stuff and DeJounte Murray possibly being on the move from the Hawks. But what about Trae Young, right? Like, at some point,
you really want to get Trae Young traded. I've detected this in multiple.
I don't want to get Trae Young traded, but like again, it's like they're going all around all these. Like, we brought in DeJounte Murray, we changed coaches, we changed this, we did that, and again, I realize Trae Young offensively is amazing, and he's the most popular athlete in Atlanta, and they draw well because of Trae Young. But like, are you trying to draw well? Are you trying to win? And can you win big with Trae Young? I guess most people in the NBA don't think you can, or at least it hasn't proven to be. They had the one Eastern Conference Finals run several years ago in Atlanta. Outside of that, it's been frustration. So I guess that's my question is, can Landry trade Trae Young now?
The way it's been described to me consistently since we started hearing DeJounte's name as a potential trade target for various teams is that the Hawks want to build around Trae Young and Jalen Johnson at this point, that those two guys are the, quote, keepers, and a trade is possible with anyone else on the roster. So to this point, I would say the Hawks are not interested in fielding trade pitches for Trae Young. Is that an eternal stance? I wouldn't think so. I mean, anything is possible in the future, but I don't see the Hawks doing something that drastic in season. Was it something they might consider down the road? Again, I mean, I'm sure at some point, if things continue the way they've been going, because they are high on the list of disappointing teams this season, maybe they'll be in a position where they decide they're wanting to look at it. But again, my sense is that's not the direction they want to go right now.
Okay. Who is the biggest name player who will be traded around the trade deadline?
Well, I think DeJounte, based on who has not yet been moved, would probably be the most likely. I mean, I will throw out the caveat that, last season, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant got traded in the final 4 or 5 days before the deadline. And if you would have asked me at this point, had we done this a year ago, basically 2 weeks out, I don't know that anyone was predicting Kyrie Irving or Kevin Durant getting traded. So there is at least always the potential for surprises. But I think you also have to recognize, we've seen 5 trades already. James Harden got traded on Halloween. OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam are significant players. This is not it's not like we're just seeing trades that are based on cap stuff. So we've already seen quite a bit of movement, and Rozier getting traded yesterday. So these are pretty significant moves, and I think we will see a good bit more action here in the next 2 weeks. But is it going to, can I promise you a blockbuster? Can I promise you, a superstar trade? I don't know that there will be another one this season.
Doug Gottlieb Show here on Fox Sports Radio. What about the Lakers and Darvin Ham? Right, when LeBron's upset, it's kind of the same MO, right? He does the disconnected look, the weird answers. No one knows how to please him. Some people think, all right, well, let's make a big trade, go get DeJounte Murray. But what about Darvin Ham? Is he on solid footing in L.A.?
He's totally on solid footing. Darvin Ham is going nowhere. And look, they've definitely wobbled since the in-season tournament. I don't think there's any question, but I think with the job Darvin Ham did last season as a first-time coach, starting in a 2-10 hole, and remember, the Lakers weren't just sub 500 early in the season. They didn't start really getting it together till after March 15th. And then, yes, they had some fortune with the way the playoff landscape played out for them, but they got all the way to the conference finals. And, I think people forget that in today's NBA especially, the coach really has to take on the spokesman role more than they ever have. And you're talking to the media multiple times a day. And there's been a lot of rocky, patches, I guess. There's been many ups and downs in Darvin Ham's first season and a half. And I think he's been a pretty sturdy force in kind of helping steer the team through all that. And based on my understanding, I think, Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka are huge fans of his and recognize that he has been a steadying force through a lot of ups and downs. So there's no question the Lakers, their play, I think they're 8-14 since the in-season tournament. So, there have certainly been some alarming stretches, but I don't know that they can make an impact trade in season. They might just have to do it with the current squad and hope that D'Angelo Russell can continue to play the way he has here in the last week plus, and maybe Gabe Vincent comes back and is the free agent difference maker they thought that they were getting when they signed him away from Miami.
I don't understand why they brought D'Angelo Russell back. It didn't make any sense to me. He and Jared Vanderbilt, they couldn't play those guys in the playoffs, and so they re-signed him? That doesn't make any sense to me. I
think especially the deal at which they were able to sign D'Angelo Russell, their thinking was we'll be able to trade him if it doesn't work out, and it is a pretty tradable contract. I don't think Atlanta wants it because D'Angelo does have a player option for next season, but it's not like an onerous 5-year crazy number deal. I think ultimately the Lakers would be able to move that contract at some point. And look, they might do it. They might end up doing it now. They're interested in Bruce Brown as well. Toronto wants a first-round pick and a quality player for Bruce Brown. That's ambitious. I don't know if the Raptors can get that much, but maybe it's not DeJounte Murray. Maybe it's Bruce Brown. But the Lakers are looking. They're trying. But I think they are also realistic that any trade you want to propose, any trade that the Lakers might be able to make before the deadline doesn't necessarily put them in a dramatically better place than they are now. So I think standing pat is something that they're also still strongly considering.
What about the Warriors? Are they going to try and do anything?
The Warriors, to me, they were not one move away from, quote, fixing themselves. And then what's just happened to them is such an unspeakable tragedy. It's one of the saddest things I've ever seen in my 30-plus years covering the league. I cannot imagine being at a team function and Dejan Milojevic, just a beloved assistant coach there. His passing, how it happened. The Warriors will play tonight for the first time since it happened. honestly, I just don't think Golden State is thinking about anything else right now except losing a beloved colleague.
Yeah, and I don't know if people saw, he played for, I think, 2 clubs back in his homeland, and they played against each other. And I'll tweet out the ceremony. It was unbelievably emotional. Like, this is a beloved dude with the Warriors and then worldwide as a player and as a coach. It's just incredibly tragic news. Mark, you're the best. Thanks so much for joining us. Look forward to your work as we get closer to the trade deadline. Make sure, by the way, you download, subscribe, rate, and review This League Uncut. It's a new podcast covering the NBA with Mark Stein, who's been doing it forever, and Chris Haynes. Incredible insight into all the stories you really need to know about, and some you didn't know existed in the NBA. Stein, thanks for joining us.
Talk soon.